Okay, so let's start the webinar. Thank you everyone for joining this webinar on consumption reduction and waste prevention. This webinar is part of the global webinar series of Gaia. So we aim of sharing collective expertise on the issues we work, from consumption, plastic pollution, zero waste, impacts on incineration, and environmental issues. My name is Larissa. I will be I'll be moderating the webinar today. I'm a consumption production campaigner at Zero Waste Europe. I work mainly with plastic and other products, but also on economic incentives such as APR, DRS, and new zero waste business models. So my organization, Zero Waste Europe, is a regional European branch of Gaia, and we aim at eliminating waste in our society. Today, the webinar will cover the consumption reduction and waste prevention practice. As you might know, plastic pollution crisis reaffirms that we cannot recycle our way out of plastic pollution, and we need to think about other ways and systems to prevent production and consumption of this material, and to move through from the linear system to a circular one, to move away from the throwaway society, and to have to a zero waste society. So in this webinar, we will share different tools to promote and enable waste prevention and consumption reduction through examples of practice on policies, business models, and community organizing. So I will introduce the speakers. We are pleased to have three amazing speakers with us. So Javier San, he's a zero waste campaigner and research associate at the Wild at Heart Legal Defense Association, Taiwan. He's dedicated to eliminate single-use items and fighting plastic pollution. He's now working on phasing out single-use items, looking for sustainable alternatives, and change the consumerism mindset and throwaway culture. He's also working on around 5-year project to build a zero waste model county in Taiwan. So he will be the first speaker. After that, we'll have Antigone Dalamaga. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing right. So Antigone was born and raised in Montreal, Canada, and she has almost 20 years experience in the field of sustainable waste management at the local, regional, national, EU, and international level. And she's also an expert at European level on waste prevention and reuse issues. Both through her job as director of Ecological Recycling Society, ECOREC, and through Reuse, where she has been president since 2013. Our last speaker, but not least, Miriam Godon. She's the program director at Upstream. Previously, she was the California director of Clean Water Action, and where she launched the Rethink Disposable, a program that helps food service operations moving to throwaway free. And she was a leading advocate helping to Clean Scenes Coalition and to secure 150 local bag bans and 100 full bans, and have done microbeads in personal care products as well in California. Just going through a bit before the speakers, a bit of information on the webinar. So it's going to be recorded. We're going to go through the 3 presentations of the speakers, and then we're going to have a Q&A section in the end. There is a Q&A box that you should found in your screen, so you can, all your questions, you can put it there. You also have a chat box, and you're welcome to introduce yourself and say hi, and any other comments, you can put that in the chat box. If you have any issues as well, hearing or anything, you can also put it down in the chat box. I guess that's it for the introduction. And yeah, so yeah, this is the agenda. So we can start with the presentation of Javier Sam on the waste prevention policy and campaigns in Taiwan. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Javier, you can share your screen and go ahead. Thank you. Sorry, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now yes.
I'm seeing our video or images blocking the presentation, but other people won't see it. Or it's just my problem.
We can see your presentation. Yeah, yeah. You
Okay.
just start sliding. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So
perfect.
I'll start. Okay. I'm here to present some waste reduction policy and about citizen awareness in Taiwan. Um, okay, I previous worked in the Taiwan Watch Institute, and right now I work for Wild at Heart Legal Defense Association. For waste reduction policy, uh, first of all, I'd like to give an example that since 2000, the two major cities, Taipei and Xinbei cities, which you can see at the right figure in the dark brown area, uh, the population of Taiwan is like 20 million, only 20 million people. And those two cities comprise of 20% of total population. So since 2000, the central EPA, Taiwan EPA has this household residual garbage bag system. That means that uh, we have before that we have this waste segregation, so we will separate recyclables and compostables, and also the residual means that it cannot be recycled or composed. So in order to decrease the waste, uh, in Taipei and Xinbei, your household waste, if it is not recyclable or not compostable, you have to buy specific bags for those residual waste. So that means a lot. And after the policy, the residual waste generation in those two large cities reduced significantly. So the next slide will show you that actually this is the usual daily usual things in Taiwan. Everywhere we have this garbage truck, as the yellow truck you see there. It goes into every small street twice a day, and it has this kind of classical music sound like Beethoven, I guess. It's very loud, so when you hear the music, you just go out of your house and throw away your garbage. So as you can see, the green bag that is thrown into the truck, that is the bag you have to pay for. So uh, so if you produce less residual waste, of course you will pay for less. For and yeah, that's it. Um, and then I'd like to introduce a platform uh, that is working in Taiwan. In 2017, there is a platform the EPA, Taiwan EPA, and 12 NGOs decided to work together, and the EPA treat we NGOs as experts in many ways of waste management. So in the 12 NGOs, there are some NGOs dedicated in conservation, some are dedicated in basic research of the recycling rate or the composting system of Taiwan, and some of them do the cleanup. So they go to do the coastal cleanup. So and others like my organization is both local and international connected. So there are 12 NGOs like this, and each office of Taiwan EPA. So we sit together. We have a meeting every 2 months, and the goal is to use coastal cleanup data to make policy to in order to ban single-use plastic. So, as we all know that if we only do the coastal cleanup, it will never be clean because it will always go back. So we have to reduce from the source. But the priority to reduce our ban on the source is determined by the ICC data we gathered in Taiwan. So we have the scheduled timeline to ban like straws and plastic cups and cutleries and and such. Yes. So the final goal of this platform is that there will be no single-use plastics by 2030, and so I think this presents a special case of the cooperation between NGOs and the central government. So first of all, we have banned straws in several places beginning last July 1st, and no plastic straws can be provided in like government buildings, hospitals, schools, shopping malls, and fast food chains. And you might wonder why don't we ban it nationally, just every store? Because we have this experience like in the early 2000, the EPO at that time want to ban plastic, and they just want the outright ban. So every place in Taiwan cannot provide plastic bags, even in traditional markets. If you have went to the traditional markets in Taiwan, you will know that it is almost an impossible mission. So eventually, that policy failed. So after that, when the government wants to ban something, they will start from, of course, themselves, government buildings and hospitals, schools, shopping malls, and fast food chains. And and in the beginning, there's a lot of disagreement from the people. They say that I cannot drink without the straw, and but we just promote our narrative that actually for coke for coke or something or even coffee, you can just drink it with your mouth and not straw is actually not necessary unless you are you have some physical uh, issues or if you are infants. But we also have alternative for that. For example, like silicone made straws or stainless steel straws and also glass straws. So that won't be a problem for those people who really need straws. So uh, we have this ban and all the targeted uh, sectors just follow the rules. So there's no plastic straw given in these targets. And what surprised me is that uh, out some restaurants or some other stores outside those targets also voluntarily stop giving plastic straws. Like the TGI Fridays in Taiwan, they just stopped giving straws since last year, and Starbucks also stopped giving plastic straws, and maybe it was just last week. It surprised me that even 7-Eleven and Family Marts, they also do not provide plastic straws. And because in Taiwan actually, Taiwan is a very crowded space in the city. So and for 7-Eleven and Family Marts, this kind of convenience store, you can see it you can see them in every block. So, I think the policy is very influential, and even 7-Eleven stopped giving plastic straws. So and then later we have this timeline like no single-use plastics by 2030, and then we'll gradually uh, ban other single-use plastics, and at the same time in the future we will expand those targets that are not allowed to provide plastic straws. So uh, this is the way our government to ban some single-use plastic. They start from those targets that is more easily for them to just switch to no plastic straw situation. So I think also I think there is a synergy because between those voluntary stores like 7-Eleven and citizen awareness. For example, in Taiwan there is a famous Facebook page is it can be translated from free from plastic, and it has 200,000 members. That is almost 10% of our total population. And in that page, they share uh, solutions to eliminate daily plastic use. For example, they provide like stores where you can buy uh, toothbrush that is made by bamboo, and where you can buy clothes, diapers, where you can buy menstrual cups, um, and also there are many creative person in this group, and they also provide some redesign methods in. So when something is broken, they provide ways for you to you can fix it yourself. You don't have to buy a new one. And the second one is that I just mentioned that there is an increasing use of menstrual cups, clothes pads, and clothes diapers. And I'm trying to make a system. I'm currently now. Currently trying to make a model. I will trying to find a care center for the elderly or a kindergarten, and together with a social enterprise to wash those diapers. I'm still working on it, but in in one uh, in one daycare center for the elderly, they have already used closed diapers for almost a decade. But just there are some complications because recently, because of the switch system is not covered in that place, so they stop these closed diapers, and then switch back to disposable diapers. And many there are more and more people that they can shop in traditional market with no plastic at all, and so actually in the next slide you can see this one use a small stroller, and there's a black box, and put it on the small stroller, and and he used a reusable bag, and just for if he or she is buying vegetables, it doesn't have to be in certain containers. You just put it in the bag. And if you have to buy something that has some oil, you just put it in like those lock boxes. So you can see she has she has bought various things, and she has many kinds of containers for each of them. So actually, in Taiwan, those people just make the traditional markets the new package-free store. So I think that was there's growing momentum right now for the citizens in Taiwan, and I think it would reflect on the future's policy making, and make our progress more and more smoothly. And I think that's the last slide. Yes, thank you. And if you have any questions, I think I'll have to answer right now.
Thank you very much, Javier. Yeah, it's an exception because you have to leave. So yeah, maybe as an exception, if anyone has any questions to Javier, because he needs to leave, but otherwise the Q&A is in the end of the webinar. Well, if there's no questions, at least for now, but if you have any further questions afterwards, you can always put in the Q&A. There's a Q&A button in your screen. You can always drop the question there, and if you're for Javier, you can always answer afterwards.
Okay. So
Yes.
I have to keep the Zoom on in order to see the Q&A, or
No.
just
You can stop sharing your screen, please.
okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot for your presentation and good examples in Taiwan. Indeed, on this, using the cleanup to make policies, it's really important. And we also have this on the Breakthrough from Plastic movement, where they do brand audits of the cleanups. So they show where are the big polluters, you know, in order to really, because we cannot clean up our mess, this mess. We need to close the tap, right? So thanks a lot. And we can now go to the second speaker. So Antigone will present, will be a presentation on preventing waste to the promotion of repair and reuse in Europe, in European cities. You're good to go.
Okay, I hope you can hear me now. Hello, everyone from my end. Greetings from Athens. I'll be presenting activities mostly that we're doing as within the context of the Reuse Network, and I'll be presenting the R Reuse Network. It's a European network of social enterprise network. So it's a network of networks across Europe. Of social economy actors, so mostly social enterprises and NGOs active in the field of prevention, repair, reuse, and recycling activities. So a little bit about the network. We have 28 national and regional members that mostly, for the most part, have their own members. We also have a member from New York City. So for those of you from the US, shout out. What has the network done? For 2017, we've managed as a network to divert over 1 million tons of materials from landfill and incineration for reuse, repair, and recycling. We've employed about 160,000 people. So these could be anything from regular employees to volunteers and trainees in reintegration programs, because like I said, we're social economy actors. So we also give great importance to the social aspect. And so we have our members between them have about 7,000 reuse shops across Europe that count about 40 million customers. And overall, at least the numbers we've been able to tabulate and confirm, we've had a turnover of over, as an entire network, of 1.4 billion euros. So what materials, the million tons I talked about earlier, what were they? So mostly furniture. We've separately collected 270,000 tons of furniture. We managed to reuse 140,000 tons of that. 280,000 tons of textiles were separately collected. 100,000 tons were reused. 300,000 tons of electrical and electronic equipment were separately collected. 35,000 tons were reused. 30,000 tons of books and records were separately collected, of which 6,500 tons were reused. And 25,000 tons of bric-a-brac, so that would be small household items like cutlery, vases, decorations, and so forth, of which 11,000 tons were reused. We also have members that work with bicycles, construction demolition waste, bio-waste, glass, paper, plastics, and wood. So the environment, a little bit about the environmental and social benefits of reuse. It's estimated that about a third of the goods collected at waste recycling centers is still reusable and could be sold secondhand instead of being recycled or landfilled. So there's still a lot of stuff that's ending up being recycled or landfilled when it could still be reused and have its life cycle extended. It's also estimated that if 1% of municipal waste in Europe was prepared for reuse, it could potentially create 200,000 local jobs across Europe. And this a little bit about the social integration aspect, that investing in retraining someone and reintegrating someone. A study from the Belgian government has shown that it gives a net return of about 12,000 euros to the government in giving the ability to this person to be able to become a productive member of society again. So the job creation potential of 10,000 tons of used goods, I think the numbers speak for themselves. Reusability has a lot of potential, of social potential as well, of creating jobs, of supporting the social social aspect of a community. And I won't get into the environmental benefits because I think the crowd already is well aware of them. So what policies can encourage reuse at a city level? So for us and our members, we think 5 are key. One is having access to the waste stream. In Europe, we have reuse activities, but they're split between reuse activities that are prevention. So for waste that's donated that hasn't entered the waste stream officially, and preparation for reuse activities that has to do with waste that has entered the waste stream. So especially for preparation for reuse, it's a question of having access to that waste stream, because once it officially enters waste, who has access to it and how changes from city to city and region to region and country to country in the EU. Encouraging citizens to reuse and repair. investing in quality collection points, and the use of green and social procurement. So under the updated Waste Framework Directive, Article 11.11 says that if you have separate collection facilities, and the things that aren't going for reuse, things aren't going for reuse there by the people that are running it, the city or the state should make sure that it's facilitated, access is facilitated so that these can be these can go for reuse and preparation for reuse activities. Another thing that's worked very well and that we believe can be a real driver is setting prevention and reuse targets. So, for example, in Flanders, it's part of Belgium. The government, the regional government, has set a separate target of 7 kilos of reuse per inhabitant. Up until I think last year it was 5 kilo that was reached, and now the new target is 7 kilos by 2022. So what that means is the affiliated reuse centers are charged with making sure that they collect 7 kilos of products from per inhabitant, and that so that these can be reused. In exchange, the region gives them the right to have access to the waste stream. It gives them the right to have access. It's in their list, so if people want to donate something, they know where to go. They have to be within those reuse centers, and that way it can be counted, measured, and so forth. The Walloon government, which is another region of Belgium, has set a separate target of 2% of preparing for reuse for electrical and electronic equipment. A little bit at the national target. Spain was the first country to set a separate target for within its 50% target for recycling and preparation for reuse. It set a very specific target, 2% target, for preparation for reuse for furniture, textiles, electricals, and other suitable goods. So these must be redirected for repair and resale across Spain. So other things, encouraging citizens to reuse and repair. An example here is in 2017, Graz in Austria has given citizens the opportunity to be reimbursed. So this is fiscal incentives of up to 50% of the repair cost, amounting up to 100 euro per year to its inhabitants. So it's giving them an incentive to go get their stuff repaired. So at the city level, other things that cities can do is invest in the collection points. So I mentioned the access to the waste stream, making sure that at these collection points, reusable products are collected separately from recyclables, making sure that the reusable products have weatherproof installation, so they're not so that the elements don't ruin them, and to make sure that it's easy for people to access these collection points. So here you see a picture. The first one is a bad example. So you see things outside in the weather and the rain and things like that. So the ability to for these items to be reused after being exposed to the elements is reduced drastically. Whereas if things as simple as weatherproofing an installation and so forth drastically increases the potential for repairability and reusability. I'll skip through this because I know I'm running I want to make sure I get through everything. So some examples with cities and what they've done. One example is City of Dublin with the Rediscovery Centre, the boiler house in Ballymun, Dublin. This was an old abandoned boiler house in Dublin. And they gave it to the Rediscovery Centre, and it was converted into a point where people can rediscover fashion, rediscover furniture, rediscover bicycles, rediscover paint, and so forth. So there are different social economy actors involved in this. One is Rediscover Fashion, and it takes discarded materials and redesigns them and repurposes them for clothing, accessories, and homeware ranges, and teaches people how to repair and provides them with reuse skills through workshops and talks so that they know what they can do. Furniture, Rediscover Furniture does the same thing with old furniture. So it fixes old furniture, but it also provides courses, restoration, it teaches people how to restore things, and it also reuses and resells furniture. Rediscover Paint collects paint from the recycling centers and sells the recycled paint in their eco store for €1 per liter. The aim is to divert paint from disposal and incineration and provide affordable paint for reuse to the public and community organizations. Rediscover Cycling collects bikes and revamps them and resells them. It also has on-site bike clinics. So if there's something wrong with your bike, you can go and have it fixed there. It also provides, the whole center provides lessons for school children and site visits and so forth. It employed 74 people in 2018, 36 of which were from disadvantaged groups. And it's funded by Dublin City Council and the EPA and its own activities. The Helsinki Metropolitan Area Reuse Center, Kerätyskeskus, I hope I pronounced that right. So this is a reuse center that's partly owned in small part by the Helsinki metropolitan area and 3 or 4 other cities as well. And so it's a traditional reuse center, but it also has something that's called Plan B. So it's a line of upcycled products. So it takes everything that couldn't be reused and converts it into a new line. So you see some of that in the pictures there. It provides environmental education to 60,000 people annually from all spectrum of society. It had 4.3 million items were sold last year. So not all of them were sold. In fact, 2.9 were sold, and 1.4 were just given away because they didn't want it to end up in for recycling or landfilling. A little bit of the metrics for the Helsinki Center. So through their reuse activities, they preserve 46.5 million kilos of solid natural resources, 3.1 million cubic meters of water, and the equivalent of 12,600 tons of CO2 emissions. A little bit of what we're doing in Greece as well, where we're setting up with other partners to sorting and classification centers for WEEE. One is in Athens, one is in the north of Greece. with a capacity, the one in Athens, of 1,000 tons per year, 200 of which are going to be prepared for reuse. The one in the north is half that. There's also an online platform in English and Greek for where people can exchange their electrical and electronic equipment across Greece. And also we're implementing a lot of repair cafes across Greece, so people can come and learn how to repair their goods. There's information here about another project that Reuse is in. It's but you can read about that on the internet. I don't want to take up too much more time. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Antigone. It was really nice to see all the examples from the European cities. Reuse is really important. We really like become after prevention, so in the waste hierarchy. So, and we are now, well, we have been talking a lot in Europe about recycling, but now we're pushing more for reuse already. It's about time, to talk about reuse. And it's good to see all your examples, and I think we have really good examples to share and push for policies for reuse, and that hopefully we gonna get it soon, like targets and everything. Thank you very much. So now let's go into the last speaker, but not least. Midian is going to talk about how to build throwaway-free places and communities, and the experience from the US. You can share your screen, and yeah, you're good to go. I'm not sure. I cannot hear you. I'm not sure if you had already started speaking.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay. Okay.
Okay. So good morning from San Francisco. It's 5:45 a.m. here, and I am really happy to talk with you about some of the new initiatives that we're launching here at Upstream. First of all, okay, it would be helpful if my slides would move. Oh, there we go. So about Upstream, who we are. We are an organization that sparks innovative solutions to plastic pollution, and we are working all across the United States. We're a small organization and have recently re-envisioned ourselves. We started out as the Product Policy Institute in 2003, and we worked on laws that held producers responsible for their waste at end of life, extended producer responsibility laws, and we set up seven producer responsibility stewardship organizations across the country, and helped enact 74 different laws for take back of a variety of materials. But when we got to plastics and packaging, we connected more with the marine plastic pollution community, and we realized that take back for recycling and recycling itself really isn't working for plastic pollution. And we started really focusing on, came to realize that the solutions lie in reduce and reuse rather than recycle. We 2 years ago went through a reimagining and re-envisioning process. We rebranded ourselves Upstream, and we decided to go all in on this issue of single-use plastics, primarily the materials that are getting into the marine environment. So here's what we've come up with. I'm just trying to figure out how to move. Yeah, there we go. I'll make everybody disappear. Oh, it's not letting me. All right. So forgive me. So for us, we are thinking about culture change, and in launching our program, we're thinking about what it takes to change culture. So I'm just going to go back in history for a little while, talking about U.S. culture. When I was growing up, this is what it was. This was what it looked like to travel on an airplane. You get on an airplane, and as soon as you reached altitude, everybody around, for me, it was all the grown-ups around, would light up their cigarettes, and it would be impossible to breathe with all the cigarette smoke. And it was the same way anywhere we went, any public space. If we went to a restaurant or anywhere that we went where there was a large crowd, the air was filled with cigarette smoke. And it was quite normal, the smoking culture. In fact, I can remember in school, in art class, regularly every year making an ashtray for my parents as a gift. Now, I have grown kids, and I don't think they have ever seen an ashtray other than in the movies. And this is not their experience when they go to a restaurant or when they're in an airplane. These are no longer places where you will be inundated with cigarettes. In fact, as a result of the smoke-free places campaign that happened in the U.S., which was both an education campaign and a policy campaign, smoking in the United States has dramatically decreased, and this is no longer our culture. Well, we've decided that this is what we want to create in the United States, and for single-use plastics and other kinds of packaging. And the question is, how do we make this happen? Also, going back in history, I would say that the United States is the epicenter of the throwaway culture. It started here. It started in the 1950s with the consumer goods manufacturers and primarily the plastics industry, selling to the American housewife the idea of throwaway living. You can see Life magazine, which was very popular back in the 50s, back in the day, that said that disposable items cut down on household chores. This was going to be a way to liberate the American housewife from all of her household chores. Now, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and I remember how this culture, this throwaway living culture, started to take hold. I remember seeing the McDonald's for the first time, passing McDonald's with my family in the car, and my parents just thought it was absolutely ridiculous, the idea that we would drive through a restaurant and get our meal in all this packaging, that we would sit in the car and eat and throw all this stuff away, or that we would have a fast meal sitting inside a restaurant and on paper and plastic. They just thought that was crazy. But the culture changed dramatically, obviously, and the United States is the culture that exported fast food and getting your coffee, Starbucks coffee, and getting your coffee in a to-go cup. So much so that it's really hard to change that culture right now. And I don't know what your experience is where you live, but in the United States, if I bring a reusable mug to a Starbucks or any cafe chain and ask them to and hand it to them to get my coffee, they're very likely to make the coffee in a paper cup and pour it into my reusable mug, which is extremely frustrating after you've hauled this mug around all day long. So why is it so hard? It's really just we've gotten to a point where it's very mindless. The grabbing the paper cup or grabbing the plastic straw. So it's our obligation, and we feel it very strongly, activists in the United States, to create this new paradigm and this new mindfulness about how we consume food and beverages. And I will say that we have decided at Upstream to focus on food and beverage packaging, because that is, when you look at all of the uh, data on what's ending up in the marine environment, we put out something called the ban list, with 5 gyres, and it's a compendium of all of the shoreline cleanup and coastal cleanup data sets. And you look at what most of it is, and 70 to 80% of it, of what's getting in the marine environment, is food and beverage packaging. So it's really important so in focusing on food and beverage packaging, before I get to our strategies, I'm going to talk about why we've come to the conclusion that reusables are better than disposables. There are all kinds of ways to measure the environmental impact of a product, through primarily companies and decision makers are doing this through life cycle analysis. And these are LCAs, or life cycle assessments. And LCAs tend to measure a variety of different environmental outcomes, from energy consumption to greenhouse gas or emissions and global warming potential, to water quality impacts and resource extraction. Unfortunately, they don't look at things, mostly they don't look at things like, the potential for the product to end up in the environment as a pollutant. They generally don't look at the toxics and the health threats from a toxics lens. The most common way to look at it is greenhouse gas or global warming potential. So I'm just going to give you one example of how life cycle analysis helps us draw the conclusion that reusables win. This is from one study that took a look at all of the existing life cycle analyses for comparing a reusable ceramic cup to a disposable either polystyrene foam cup, as you can see on the left side, or a paper cup. So this is just a bunch of different studies, and the numbers below each study shows you how many times you would have to reuse the ceramic cup before you have a lower global warming or embodied energy impact than the disposable foam or paper cup that it replaces. So you can see on the left side for the foam cups, and the number of uses before you get the benefit ranges from 1,000 in the 1994 study to 70 in the 2014 study. And the question is why is there such a big difference in this range? And the answer is that over time, because it really starts from 1994, we end up in 2014, over time, dishwashers have become increasingly more efficient. So in the latest study, in 2014, Woods and Bakshi showed that you would only have to reuse your ceramic cup 70 times before you start getting the environmental benefit, you basically replace 70 foam cups by using your ceramic cup 70 times, and at that point the ceramic outperforms the foam in terms of environmental benefit. And we see the same thing with paper cups. The most recent one showed that if you reused your ceramic cup 31 times, you get more environmental benefit than using paper cups. So this is just one example, but we find this pretty much in every measure, and we're working on putting together a paper on this to make the case that reusables always win when it comes to food and beverage packaging. And this is, so I had my slides backwards. So this is the ban list 2.0 that shows the top 20 products that get into the marine environment from a variety of studies. And we can see that amongst the top 20 items, most of them, 14 of them, are food and beverage packaging. So that is how we decided to focus on food and beverage packaging. And now I'm going to talk about how we're doing that. We decided that that creating throwaway-free places means basically sitting down and on site at anywhere where you're sitting down to dine. You should be dining with real cups, real plates, and real cutlery, nothing disposable. And when you're taking out, so that we think of food service in terms of on-site, sitting down. There's also takeout. And it's in this arena that we also need to replace the disposables with reusables. So we need new systems for taking out. And this is both in taking out from brick and mortar stores, but also here in the US and in a lot of urban areas, there's a tremendous growth in the online ordering sector. So online, you order online and you get things delivered. So we also need to disrupt that system with reusables. And also in places in public institutions and public places that reflect our cultural values. So, aquariums and museums and sporting arenas. These are all places that where we are trying to disrupt culture. And we're doing this using a three-pronged strategy. The first is to create the policies that promote reduce, and reuse in foodware. The second is to create the infrastructure so that, infrastructure misspelled, my bad. And the third is creating models at these iconic public places. So we'll start with policy. The first policy that we enacted that did this was just in 2018, in February 2018, we passed an ordinance in a small town in California called Berkeley, small but mighty, and there the policy says no disposables would be used for dining on site. The city wanted the takeout packaging that is disposable to be compostable. We didn't want, recyclables are not working because there aren't many opportunities to recycle. So they said everything has to be compostable within their system and has to be free of PFAS or perfluorinated alkyl substances, which are the highly persistent, what we call forever chemicals that we're finding in compostable foodware that contaminates compost. So they have to be PFAS free. And then to disrupt that takeout culture and start getting people to bring their own reusables, there is now a mandatory 25-cent charge for the disposable takeout container. And this incentivizes, as I said, it incentivizes people to BYO, bring your own, but also the city is also providing grants and assistance to create these new reuse systems. So you don't have to bring your own. You'd be able to go to a cafe and get a reusable cup and have an easy place to return it. And also these grants and assistance programs are trying to set up reuse for food containers as well. And the ordinance said that in 3 years, the city will come back and consider adding a charge for food containers once those systems are set up. Now, very recently, the city of San Anselmo and also just recently the city of Watsonville passed similar ordinances. And next week, actually on Monday, the city of San Francisco is introducing an even stronger version of this that will actually attach the charge to food containers as well. And it will say that food business operators will be required to provide a reusable alternative. So the companies, the food service operator gets to keep the 25-cent charge on the cup and on the container. And in the San Francisco law that's being introduced, they will have to use that money to set up a reusable alternative option for their customers. So how are we passing these laws? Well, first of all, we are in the United States, it makes the most sense for us to do this work, this policy work, at the very local level. It's hard, as I'm sure you all realize, for us to get something like this through our federal legislature at this point in time. And the way that we have succeeded in addressing plastic pollution and other environmental issues is by working from the local level up to the state level, and trying to get these laws passed at the state level. We did that with bag bans and the bag charges. In California, I worked with other allies. We passed 150 local bag bans before we were able to get California to do it at the state level. So this is our strategy here with promoting reduce and reuse in foodware. And we basically were successful in passing the Berkeley ordinance and the San Anselmo ordinance, and we're working in San Francisco in the same way by engaging the business community in understanding that reusables actually save them money, and we have lots of information to support that. And getting them to understand the policy to begin with, to understand that, yes, they have to charge their customers 25 cents per cup and per container, but they get to keep that money. Once they learn that, they're a little bit more on board with the policy. We also are using beach cleanup and brand data to convince policymakers that this is a problem. And we're engaging all related government departments in educating them about the need for these policies, and also looking at how much they are spending on things like litter cleanup and control. Once they think of it through that lens, they understand that turning off the tap, not only makes good business sense, but it makes good sense from a government perspective as well. And we have been very successful in using kids as advocates. So we had a group of kids in Berkeley that were at every press conference and testified at every hearing, and kids are powerful advocates. So we like finding teachers and classes that engage them in this kind of work. So moving from policy to infrastructure, we're also trying to create, at the same time that we're putting in these mandates to have disposable-free dining on site and to charge for takeout cups and containers. We want to make sure that the infrastructure is there for takeout in those cups and containers. And we're starting pilot projects here in the Bay Area. In the San Francisco region, we have several pilot projects being launched to create reusable cup and container programs that will, we are looking at this the way bike sharing models launched in the United States, starting with some pilot programs around the Bay Area. And our goal is within 3 years to link them all up into one geographically large linked system where you could pick up a reusable cup on one side of the San Francisco Bay, do your morning commute to work to the other side of the bay, drop it off. It's all part of one system and it's uniform. We think that scale is going to be very important for making these systems work, and so that's our vision, is scaling it up. And we are also doing this sort of work in aquariums, zoos, and ballparks, where we are working with them to bring in real cups, plates, and utensils, to document how much money they're saving, and to showcase to their customers what the environmental benefits are. And these are pictures taken from the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which has really gotten rid of absolutely everything that's disposable. It's pretty complicated because these institutions have contracts with companies like Coca-Cola to provide product in their plastic bottles. So a big challenge here is getting these large institutions to change their contracts with companies like Coke and Pepsi. But that is happening, and you can see at the top of the upper level of the slide, you can see that the Monterey Bay Aquarium no longer offers, their fountain drinks are no longer Coca-Cola. They don't, in their grab-and-go section, they really don't have Coke products anymore. They replaced it with a local vendor. So it's a process of creating this culture change. We're working in the Bay Area, we're working in Boston and in New York City on creating throwaway-free places, throwaway-free policies, and setting up a national network that we will be launching in probably in September to link advocates and local governments all across the United States in sharing information on these policies and on these reuse systems so that we can accelerate their development and learn from one another. So that's what we are up to. There's a better way than throwaway, and we hope that you'll join us in creating it. Thank you. Now I have to stop sharing, right?
Yes, thank you very much. It was really inspiring presentation, and really, really important issue about changing consumption behavior, which is I really like the slogan you mentioned about sit down, slow down, and make it real, because it's really true, right? We are like we need to decelerate a bit in order, to change how it was, like, to make reusable again part of our life. And I see, at least here in Europe, that it's already people already feeling better, even willing to pay a bit more for the deposit fee, just to they feel better about not using plastic or disposable or single use. And this charging, it's really important. For instance, this measure about charging a bit more for single-use products or disposable, aligned with reuse targets. So everything, all this together, I think we can, and promoting all these examples already happening in Europe and the European cities that Antigone is promoted, and in the US. So I think you can move towards more reuse, and I think the society is already being aware, and we just need to push a bit more, especially the industry, that they need to move it. They need to change their business models. There's no way back. So yeah, thank you very much. I think now we can start a Q&A session. If there is, so for everyone, I'm not sure if you have seen, there's a Q&A button in your screen. So you just, you can type your question there, and we're going to start answering the questions. So we have one here from Tiswaminathan. I think Midian already said that you'd like to answer the question.
Sure, I'd like to take one stab at this. I'm sure others have more to add, but
so yeah, if you can read the question and then answer, so everyone can.
The question is, in economic terms, how does the value of reused goods compare with new goods? So my experience is in looking at the cost of reusables versus disposable food packaging. Before I came to Upstream, I was working for another NGO called Clean Water Action. And I knew that my goal was waste prevention and changing the culture of food service in the United States. And I knew that the only way we're going to be able to do that is to be able to make the business case for it. So I created a program called Rethink Disposable. It has a URL, rethinkdisposable.org. And there you can visit that program and actually get case studies. The program has worked with over 200 food service operations, basically restaurants, and has collected data on how much they're spending on their disposable foodware, and then works with them on replacing the disposables with reusables. And then evaluates after that implementation, that change in practices, then evaluates what they're spending on food service food service ware. So even after maybe they have to install a dishwasher or purchase reusable products, the net costs to the business are always lower when they bring reusables into their operation. So just working with these the typical restaurants in our region, Rethink Disposable is showing that these businesses are saving anywhere from $500 to $20,000 a year, again, net after they've paid for the reusables. So there's a lot more data on that website. You can look at the case studies, but that's my experience with looking at the cost and the value. I will put myself on mute and see if somebody else has a different perspective.
To add to that, to what Miriam was saying, in regards to products such as furniture or textiles or electrical and electronic equipment, the concept in principle is that reused goods should always be cheaper than new products. However, there are very many variables that affect this. One of the things is how easy is it to repair? Is a product repairable? When you're looking at electrical and electronic equipment, you're looking at issues like design for obsolescence, so things are almost impossible to repair. So repairing that, access to spare parts. In Europe, we're working very hard to make sure that producers are required by law to keep spare parts to be made available even after a product is taken off the market, to make sure that these spare parts are available. If we're looking, because all these things are issues that will ultimately affect the cost and the reusability. But of course, at least in regards to our network, the purpose is to provide high quality goods, secondhand goods, to people that may not be able to buy a brand new one. In many cases, a lot of our members work closely with cities, and what comes out of the shop, people that are very poor and require social services from the city or the community services can get a ticket from the city and come in and get a new mattress or a bed frame or whatever, because they have no other way of. So it depends what aspect you're looking at it, and what kind of value you put on something, and what kind of value a city it could have something have a very high value for the community services of a city. Not everything is purely economic terms.
True. Thanks a lot for your both perspectives on that. We still have 15 or 12 minutes. Is there any other questions? Everything was super clear. Oh, if you don't have no more questions, but
Larissa, there's another question in the chat box, I think.
Sorry, thank you.
Not in the Q&A.
Let me check. I think there was a questions for Javier after his presentation. Yeah, about the cleanup in India. But well, okay. So now I have more questions. So yeah, the webinar will be available later. We're gonna send the presentations and the material recorded with further information. Okay. Yeah. So will links be provided for resource on that on this in our community? Yeah, we also can send the links from the organizations, the relevant links in the email as well on this data. I think you mentioned the data maybe on the Rethink project, Rethink Disposable, right, Media, and you can also provide the link afterwards.
Yes.
All right, great.
I can also send some case studies. Also, I just realized there is a fact sheet that project developed on the cost of the disposable foodware. I don't think it compared to the reusables, but it's very helpful to look at, like, you know, how much, like when you take out a coffee from Starbucks, how much are they spending on the cup and the sleeve and the lid, the stirrer? If all of that is replaced by, you know, by a reusable, I think that the main point for food service operations is that they have no idea how much they're spending on all this disposable foodware, and they never really spend a lot of time thinking about could they save money by replacing it with reusables. So yeah, I will definitely forward you guys some case studies and a fact sheet to share with the participants that show the cost on the disposable side, at least.
All right. So if there are no further questions, as I said, everything will be sent in email, so the material and the recording of the webinar and the relevant links. And you can also follow Gaia Facebook on Gaia Zero Waste, and Twitter. We're gonna have more webinars coming up. So please stay tuned, and thank you very much for the presentations.